hey, it's Romania Black, and I'm sorry, but after those chapters, you think I'm gonna wait? No! We had such a cliffhanger. We are on chapters. We're doing chapters 66 through 69. We are just skyrocketing into volume 3 of Thousand Autumns. And last week getting into RuoQiang, that hidden city is pretty terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. Spiders, killer gorillas. I was not ready. I was not ready for the insanity that volume 3 has been so far. Crazy town. But yeah, so we're on chapter 66, 67, 68, and 69. We're doing another set of 4 chapters that are covering pages 143 to 177. Maybe we'll get an in. I'm really sad they didn't include an illustration for the last chapter set. That was quite a few pages to go without giving us an illustration. So we'll just see if it happens this time around. But I've got some comments from you all now that we're getting into the post-Donghua content, which is really exciting. A couple of comments from chapters 56 through 58, and then a couple from Patreon for chapters 59 through 61. And I'm recording this right before chapters 62 through 65 come out, because I was like, as soon as the moderators was like, here's the comments, I was like, I have to read because I have to know what's going to happen, because Yan Wushi has just maybe reverted back to himself. I think it's Yan Wushi, or it's Yan Wushi version 2.0, the other one. We'll talk about it. But yeah, so last in their class for chapters 56 through 58, along with Claro 3, they both talked about Shen Qiao and Yuai's interaction from those chapters, but last in their class says Yan Wushi is between 13 to 17 years older than Shen Qiao, depending on how you interpret certain phrasings throughout the novel. 15 years seems a fair estimate. And yeah, they're both grown-ass men, so this does not seem to be a bit bothersome. Yeah, honestly, if Shen Qiao is 30, and that would make Yan Wushi about 45, it's not crazy at that point. I'm 38, and to be honest, men in their 40s are honestly a little bit more appealing than men in their 20s. At this point in my life, I'm like, yeah, at this point in maturity, so I get it. I get it absolutely. So yeah. There's that. Last in their class also said, along with Claro 3, I feel among many reasons why Shen Qiao's reaction to UI is not hypocritical is, 1, there is still the political consideration. UI is going against everything he believes in, while Yan Wushi's agenda would ultimately help unify China. And 2, UI's betrayal is far more personal. UI was his martial brother, and they grew up under Qifengge together. At least Yan Wushi is just a wild bit of duckweed who has an allegiance to no one and has never pretended to. I love that duckweed, because usually in the US we call it like dickweed. It's like the slang term for it that's a slur kind of. So a little wild bit of duckweed is actually really good. I'm going to use duckweed in the future. Likely, but thank you. Thank you for saying that. Ye Jing, 98, along with Zurich Joseph for chapters 56 through 58, said the phrase, left with no other choice, like using the spoon to hold down Yan Wushi's tongue. Shen Qiao certainly didn't try very hard to find another way. It's so funny because I was watching a movie on this channel. There's a reaction to it, Sword of the Stranger, and there's a scene that when I watched it, I went, oh, hello, Shen Qiao. So it just reminded me of that. But yeah, Shen Qiao did not try very hard. Let's be honest about that, shall we? Chewy for chapters 59 through 61 says, I jokingly say that Donghua Yan Wushi is Ayan. Ayan had me swooning, but that's because I wasn't betrayed and handed over to Song Jijing. I love all the facets of Yan Wushi brought out, how they brought out the rudeness in Shen Qiao, because it just shows how much Yan Wushi gets under his skin. To me, it makes Shen Qiao feel more alive and human. In the beginning, regarding self-interest and the like, Shen Qiao told Yan Wushi that it's only human nature to pursue what your wants and needs, and that everyone, including himself, has bad thoughts. Because Shen Qiao is always practicing what he preaches and mentally and vocally chooses to take the high road, Yan Wushi and we as readers don't really see these bad thoughts until now, when Shen Qiao wants to upend a bowl of soup on a child and knock Ayan unconscious for flirting with him. It's so refreshing to see Shen Qiao be someone other than the good guy, especially since these bad thoughts are harmless, but indeed not nice. Yeah, I feel like Shen Qiao has been such a saint, and he's been so saintly, and he's always, been practicing what he preaches. But then to see how Yan Wushi brings out this kind of like sassy and kind of like grumpy side of him, it makes him more human. And it's so funny because he knows he can't get on to Ayan because Ayan is not Yan Wushi, but he's just like, but it's the same body and it's the same face, and it just, it's great. I love it. I do think it's very refreshing. It's great. And so then Icy for chapters 59 through 61 says, I've always had a hard time starting this series. You reading it makes it so easy. Yay! Hooray! The English teacher in me is very satisfied with that. This is a chapter set that hooked me the most. I do love the split personalities trope. It's a shame the art isn't in color. I'd love to color code them. Purple for Yan Wushi, pink for Ayan, and maybe blue for Xie Ling? Or Xie Li? Maybe, but thank you, Icy. Yeah, it would be helpful if we color coded. Might have to do that on Whiteboard Coon because now we have Ayan, we have Xie Li, we have Yan Wushi, and we have this like other one that's not Ayan, but not Yan Wushi. It's like a pseudo Yan Wushi. It's just like, it's getting all over the place. But anyway, I've really enjoyed reading along with you all so far, and the post-Donghua content is just mwah, chef's kiss. So let's not waste any more time, shall we? Oh, buddy, let's get into it. So we're going to start chapters 66 through 69 of Thousand Autumns, and we are going to do that here. Oh, let's keep our minds in the gutter for 5 seconds here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 66, Fellow Travelers. Chen Gong stared dead-eyed at Yan Wushi. Does Sect Leader Yan have a method? Okay, so Chen Gong has poisoned himself trying to open up the sword to get part of the Fanglan scripture, not the Fanglan scriptures, but the Zhuyang scriptures out, the Zhuyang strategy. So there's that, and now he's begging for an antidote, and Yan Wushi just conveniently has it because he thought ahead. You probably noticed back when fighting those apes, their nails are both sharp and poisonous, so the moment they scratch you, the wound will begin to swell and itch. His words came neither fast nor slow. It was obvious he was completely unmoved by Chen Gong's poisoning. There was even a leisurely tone to his speech, as if it had nothing to do with him. Claws that sharp must be honed from time to time. There aren't a great variety of rocks here to choose from, so the carnelian those apes guarded were their best choice. Occasionally, they'll file their claws against it, yet they're never poisoned. That's because within a mile of every toxic substance must be something else to neutralize it, just like the spiders and apes within this ancient city. Murong Chen had found a key within those words. Sect Leader Yan means there's an antidote to my lord's poison. But understanding suddenly flashed through Chen Gong's mind. The Jade Sistanch! Is it the Jade Sistanch? Hurry, go see if there's any Jade Sistanch nearby! Murong Chen and the others quickly ran to the cliff and looked around. And sure enough, they discovered Jade Sistanch. My lord, there's indeed some here, said Murong Jun happily. Shen Qiao glanced at Yan Wushi to spite himself. The latter stood with his hands in his sleeves, his body still half hidden in the shadows. It was clear he had no intention of speaking. Chen Gong was overjoyed. Well, bring it here! Murong Chen and his nephew sliced off those jade sprigs of Jade Sistanch and brought them back. Without so much as a glance, Chen Gong quickly shoved them into his mouth and gulped them down. But a miracle did not occur. 15 minutes later, his hand was still unbearably painful and itchy, and the purplish-blue color even began to darken. It had already traveled up from his elbow and was nearly at his shoulder. Chen Gong's face was ashy pale, almost blue, a near match for the color of his arm. Only then did Yan Wushi say slowly, the Jade Sistanch is indeed the antidote, but its leaves and branches have no effect. The only part that can cure the poison is the fruit. Those apes must have consumed the fruit for generations, and that's why they fear neither the poison from the carnelian nor the spiders. That's why they can live here. As this place was once RuoQiang's altar, these apes might have been trained by the people of RuoQiang back then in order to guard the Jade Sistanch. Did you look at the leader? It's already begun to develop a human face. It obviously possessed an exceptional amount of wisdom and cunning. Originally, these words should have been fascinating. Unfortunately, their speaker's tone was dry and flat, making them rather dull. Of course, Chen Gong was not in the mood to listen to this detailed explanation of the ape's origins. On a normal day, he'd already have flown into a rage and commanded Murong Chen to seize him, but Yan Wushi held his life in his hands, so he could only swallow down his anger. It seems that Sect Leader Yan has already picked all the fruit. I don't know what you want from me, but as long as I'm capable of it, I will do as you say. Please give the fruit from the Sistanch. You know what I want. Yet Yan Wushi refused to say. Chen Gong understood Shen Qiao. He knew that Shen Qiao was an upright gentleman and that you could cheat a gentleman by using their sentimentalities against them. So during all his confrontations with Shen Qiao, he'd always held the upper hand, but this wasn't effective against Yan Wushi. Everyone knew that Yan Wushi was willful and did as he pleased. It was impossible to use common sense to infer anything about him. Chen Gong knew that even news of his survival couldn't be used to threaten him. Instead, it was Yan Wushi who held the Sistanch fruit and had become his last hope of survival. If Sect Leader Yan doesn't clarify, how can I know? He still refused to give up, putting up a final life and death struggle. Yan Wushi said coldly, "Why don't you guess if I can destroy these fruits before your dogs take action? If you're willing to take the risk, I'm not against giving it a go." The moment he said this, Murongchun, though enraged, could only stop his movements, having intended to approach him. Chen Gong gritted his teeth. "You want what's within Tai." Yan Wushi didn't reply. Here we go. Oh, here we go. Oh, man. I mean, he looks very much like Yan Wushi there, that's for sure. Look at Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao's just like, right here, right now. Oh, interesting. And you can see Chen Gong and like it's spreading up his arm. Interesting. Oh, wow. And is that the scroll in his hands? Oh, bitch. Oh, bitch. Chen Gong had no choice. He could only fish out the piece of silk hidden inside his lapel with his other hand and then pass it to Yan Wushi. "Where's the Sistanch?" Yan Wushi took the piece of silk and then retrieved a fruit from somewhere about his person and tossed it to Chen Gong. Bitter about his defeat, Chen Gong couldn't resist asking, "You'd already guessed my goal, so you specially rushed here before us, then used the fruit to threaten me." Perhaps he was in a good mood after obtaining the piece of silk, because Yan Wushi finally showed him great clemency and answered his question. The Tai sword once belonged to the Qin Commandery's Ji family. Oh, that's right! It's from his... Oh! Its hilt was always hollow, but an exceptionally rare metal was used when forging it. That metal is abnormally hard, so the only way to hide something inside its hilt is to break it open using some kind of extraordinary rock, then put great effort into reforging it again. That sword later vanished, never to be heard of again until it resurfaced in Tuyunhun. Having eaten the jade Sistanch's fruit, Chen Gong finally found some relief. It would take quite some time for the toxins to subside, though, so he could only distract himself by talking. "So the moment you saw me with the sword, you already knew it had been opened and reforged," he said. "And because I ran straight to RuoQiang looking for the carnelian, you were also able to guess that I wanted to break open the sword and retrieve the item inside. Hence you threw away the Sistanch fruit in advance, leaving only a couple for yourself, all so you could threaten me into handing over the item after I was poisoned." With the sudden realization, Chen Gong couldn't help but taunt. Even when Sect Leader Yan is suffering from such severe injuries, his scheming and calculations can still leave us in the dust. Meanwhile, Murongchun angrily rebuked, "Well, how despicable and shameless of you, reaping the fruits of others' work." Yan Wushi gave a cold laugh. To him, squabbling with them was beneath him. Murongchun flashed forward, wanting to seize Yan Wushi, but he didn't expect Shen Qiao to suddenly interfere. With his sword across his chest, he blocked Murongchun. The two of them exchanged several blows, and Murongchun realized he couldn't gain an upper hand over Shen Qiao. Surprise welled up within him, unbidden. In just a year, the blind man, who had been still too weak to truss a chicken back in Chuyun Temple, had managed to recover to this extent. No one could afford to underestimate him. In the time it took Shen Qiao to block the attack, Yan Wushi had already swiftly slipped into the darkness. "He's gone!" Murongchun yelled in surprise. At his voice, everyone turned to look. Sa Kunpeng leapt forward to investigate. Sure enough, he could find no trace of Yan Wushi. "Oh, my lord, there appears to be a mechanism here, but nothing happened when I pulled it," he cried. "He must have shut it down from the other side," said Murongchun angrily. Behind them was a passage-ceiling boulder. Well, surely he wouldn't... Well, if it's Yan Wushi, he would leave Shen Qiao behind, but surely not. Apart from the fact that there was a 1,000-pound rock blocking their path of retreat, even if they did manage to lift it again, there was still the ape leader and the venomous spiders waiting for them on the other side. It wasn't that they couldn't defeat them, but that it would exhaust far too much energy. Just thinking about those spiders and their ability to slip through every crack gave everyone goosebumps. Before them was a cliff, and beneath that cliff was a sea of carnelian crystals. They might have been beautiful, but they weren't edible, and they were even highly toxic. Having seen the awful condition Chen Gong had been in, none of them were willing to bring trouble upon themselves by coveting that carnelian. which meant that they were currently trapped here, without any paths to take and unable to leave. "Are you satisfied now, Shen Qiao?" Mu Rongjun roared, full of rage that had nowhere to go. Shen Qiao's eyes were closed as he rested. He didn't respond at all. Chen Gong said sternly, "All of you, go look to see if there are any other exits. If Yan Wushi could leave this place, well, certainly we can as well." While Mu Rongchen and the other two searched for an exit, he looked at Shen Qiao. "Taoist Master Shen, forgive my bluntness. Previously, Yan Wushi was gravely injured after those 5 martial experts ambushed him. You didn't need to bring him on the current trip, but because I said there might be some jade sistanch here, you brought him in. Forget a friend, even a stranger receiving such benevolence would be moved to tears. But now he's obtained both the jade sistanch and my silk piece, and he didn't even take you with him, but abandoned you here and left by himself. Even I feel this is an injustice to you, even if you yourself don't feel it. If I expect to be repaid for my kindness, then how much do you owe me right now?" said Shen Qiao coolly. "What repayment should you give me? If I hadn't stepped in at the broken-down temple back then, how could you have defeated those local hoodlums? Later at Chuyun Temple, if I weren't there, you would have died at Mu Rongchen's hands long ago. How could you be here ordering them around like so? But how did you repay me? By leading Mu Tipo to me? Or by threatening me with Bana's grandfather so I'd come with you to RuoQiang?" Chen Gong was unable to answer. Suddenly, none of the provocative words in his head could leave his lips. "You and I do not walk the same path," said Shen Qiao. "We never did, and we never will." At first, Chen Gong felt a little guilty, but hearing these words, he actually grew angry. "Well, true, you are noble and virtuous beyond compare," he sneered. "But what good did that bring you? I earned everything I have today through my own efforts. What's so shameful about that? I might as well tell you, I was born with the ability to remember everything I see and hear." "Oh, okay. Though I was mostly illiterate back at Chuyun Temple, I still managed to memorize everything you recited. There were so many martial experts at the scene. Who would have imagined that an insignificant nobody could pull off what they couldn't? Mu Tipo is cruel and ruthless. The people he favors never last beyond a month, and most of them suffer horrific fates. But I was able to make him recommend me to the Lord of Qi through my own abilities. And that was my true stepping stone to greater heights." Mu Rongchen and the others had indeed chosen Chen Gong, but they still couldn't help the awkwardness hearing him talk about his experience as a kept man. But Chen Gong himself had no such feelings, and he continued to speak with ease, calm and composed. "Obtaining the favor of the Emperor Qi isn't my final goal. There's no man in the world who's willing to serve others with his body, even if he's the one taking initiative in bed. Using the Lord of Qi's favor, I had him find me a teacher so I could learn to read. I know very well that those great aristocratic families will never acknowledge people with my background, but I don't need their approval. There are only 2 things in the world that allow you to rule over people's hearts. One is the book, and the other is the sword. So I need to learn as many words as possible, read as many books as possible, all in the shortest amount of time, and I succeeded." He's like fancy. He's like Reba McEntire's fancy. "Shen Qiao, why do you think that Mu Rongchen and the others chose me? Due to riches and glory? That's not it. Are kings and generals made in the womb? The kingdom of Qi is destined to fall, and they know that as soon as Qi suffers a crushing defeat, everyone will leave like rats from a sinking ship. There's no future in following the Lord of Qi, so instead they follow me. At least I know myself and my abilities well, unlike the Lord of Qi and most of his aristocrats. But what about you, Shen Qiao? You are indeed noble and virtuous, an upright gentleman. To be honest, I admire you greatly because I can never be like you, to repay evil with virtue without resentment or regret. But a gentleman like you cannot survive in this world. You'll only be swallowed up, consumed until not even your bones remain. Just like now. Yan Wushi has betrayed you again and again. In the end, you can only await your death together with an enemy like me. Isn't that ridiculous?" Shen Qiao remained silent and calm until he finished. Then he said slowly, "Chen Gong, ever since I met you, I knew you were different from the others in your hometown. You are smart and full of energy. You have ambition. You are ruthless to both yourself and others. Within these troubled times, you have the ability to become someone truly formidable. You were able to climb up the ladder of success, called Mu Tipo, and then use him to obtain the Emperor of Qi's favor on your own merits. I won't look down on you for that. The reason you always think me noble and virtuous is because deep in your heart, your conscience is still alive. You know that your methods are wrong, And that's why you subconsciously compare yourself to me. Why you're concerned of how I see you. Otherwise, everyone has their own Tao, their own path, so you need only focus on moving forward. Why stop to look at others? For a long time, Chen Gong was at a loss for words, and then he suddenly burst out laughing. You're right! You're completely right! I'm grateful to you! You've resolved my complexes and doubts, and from this point forth, I'll be able to climb even higher. Congratulations, then, said Chen Qiao flatly. He closed his eyes once more, leaning back against the chilly stone. Then he let himself thoroughly sink into the darkness, both in mind and in body. From the moment Yan Wushi had handed him to Song Jijing, Shen Qiao had learned to drop all expectations. Without expectations, there'd be no disappointment, let alone despair. So when Yan Wushi abandoned him and left him by himself, though he'd been a little surprised in the beginning, even that surprise quickly became trifling and insignificant. Yan Wushi had always been like this. Even if his personality had changed greatly, the selfishness and callousness innate to him wouldn't lessen in the slightest. For many things, just because you gave didn't mean you'd receive anything in return. He was already used to it, so why would he still be sad or disappointed? Murong Chen and the others searched everywhere, but slowly they began to feel hopeless. It was true they still had rations with them and that the daily needs of martial artists were far less than a normal person's, meaning that the rations could last them a long time, but they couldn't stay here forever. Furthermore, this place was deep underground, lacking sun or sky, and it was airless. Even if they didn't starve, they'd eventually suffocate. At this moment, Sa Kungpeng suggested, what if this subordinate goes to search at the bottom of the cliff? Perhaps there's another exit. Chen Gong thought for a moment. Very well. Carnelian is down there, but that doesn't mean there's nowhere to stand. Just be careful not to touch the Carnelian. Sa Kungpeng agreed. As Murong Jun was young and energetic, he'd grown bored after sitting around for so long, and he rose and went down with him. Pretty much everyone had some scratches from the apes. Those wounds were burned and swollen. But it wasn't anything serious, only flesh wounds. They didn't even need to eat the sistanch fruit. Applying the juice squeezed from the sistanch roots to the wounds was enough to relieve the swelling and itching. Chen Gong said to Murong Chen to go down to help them search, and then asked Shen Qiao, if we manage to get out, what will you do? Shen Qiao slowly opened his eyes. Within this darkness, no one could see the bewilderment in his gaze. Based on his pace and the amount of time that had passed, Yan Wushi should almost be back on the surface. With his abilities, even if he couldn't confront the Buddhist and Confucian sects directly for now, he could quickly contact the people of Huan Yu sect, which would at least save them from getting trapped in a dangerous situation. In other words, even without Shen Qiao, Yan Wushi could still have a good life. Shen Qiao suddenly thought of something. What you obtained just now, that was one of those Yueyang strategy scrolls. There we go. Correct, said Chen Gong. Was there anything special about the scroll compared to the others? Chen Gong was silent for a moment. How much do you know about the Yueyang strategy? The Yueyang strategy is composed of 5 volumes and combines the strengths of 3 schools of thought, said Shen Qiao. It's the product of Ta Huangjin's lifelong efforts. You've also read a couple of the other volumes yourself. Any thoughts? It is indeed the most remarkable martial arts book in the world. I've greatly benefited from it. It seems your information is incomplete, said Chen Gong. It's true the Yueyang strategy has 5 volumes, and that it combines the strengths of the 3 schools, but that only applies to the contents of 4 of the volumes. There's one more volume that has been lost for many years. No one knows where it is, but it's said that its contents are related to the martial arts of the demonic discipline. Shen Qiao startled, but after thinking closely, he found Chen Gong's words quite logical. In the past, Yan Wushi had attempted many times to use the Yueyang strategy's true chi for himself. He'd even experimented with Shen Qiao for it, repeatedly trying to bring out his potential, but reality had proven that because his martial art foundations were his demonic core, it was incompatible with Shen Qiao's Taoist core. Hence, the Yueyang strategy ended up being of little value to him, like a chicken rib that was still edible, tasteless, but a waste to throw away. If the Yueyang strategy only wrote about the martial arts of the 3 schools, Yan Wushi could never have said something like, he already had a way to patch the flaw. With how capable he was, he likely already deduced that there was a Yueyang strategy volume hidden with Tai, and that this was the exact one that he needed. Having deduced the entire sequence of events, Shen Qiao slowly exhaled, a trace of fatigue in his expression. Suddenly, he felt a little tired. but his voice remained as calm as before. So that's how it is. Tao Hongjing was indeed a man of great learning. No wonder the demonic practitioners have constantly sought the Zhiyong strategy as well. It sounds like that little piece of silk was exactly what they were after. And since you were also chasing it so anxiously, does that mean that you're practicing the martial arts of the demonic discipline? Did you join Heihuan's sect? What a joke, said Chen Gong. With my current rank and status, why would I need to join Heihuan's sect and get ordered around? If anything, it's Heihuan's sect who requires all the conveniences I can provide. So our relationship is just one of business and mutual cooperation. It benefits us both. However, saying this much was useless as well. In reality, they were still trapped here with no method to escape. Having searched around the cliff bottom once, Murong Chen and the others returned empty-handed. Everyone was a little disheartened and Chen Gong spoke no more. Instead, he took the opportunity to meditate and preserve his energy while reciting the contents of the silk scrap he'd hastily memorized earlier, wanting to integrate it within himself. Oh, so if he has like photographic memory, then him just reading it the one time was enough. That's crazy. That's crazy. He was with Shen Qiao in the Donghua when the one volume was discovered. Did he read any of it then? That'd be interesting. He'd never been the type to wait around for his death. Even in this kind of situation, he still did his absolute best to create a favorable environment for himself. That's why in these troubled times, Chen Gong had been able to rise from a penniless commoner to where he was today. To the point that even the imperial court of Qi's foremost martial artist, Murong Chen, was willing to obey his commands and dispatches. After an unknown length of time, a sound suddenly came from the stone wall. Everyone had just been nodding off and immediately opened their eyes. They turned towards the sound. They saw a silhouette reappear where Yan Wushi had originally vanished. Murong Chen reacted first. He leapt up ready to charge over with his sword. Yan Wushi! The name was uttered through clenched teeth, his voice brimming with hatred. Oh, wow! So, okay, well, I'm glad that in this one chapter we cleared up the whole spoiling thing. Glad we got that cleared up. Glad that was a thing. But, we've learned so much already. So, yeah, let's get into this. Okay. However, Yan Wushi only needed one line to freeze him in his place. Chapter 67, Escape from Trouble. The path branches off outside. Without me, you won't be able to leave. San Long! Chen Gong stopped Murong Jun. Hearing San Long in this book is a trip. Who reluctantly sheathed his weapon and returned to his place behind Chen Gong. Chen Gong cupped his hands, his manner courteous. Many thanks to Sect Leader Yan for coming back. We're deeply grateful. If Sect Leader Yan is willing to show us the way out, I promise to happily leave the piece of silk to him and never ask for it again. Yan Wushi glanced at him but didn't say anything. He simply turned to head out from where they'd entered. Murong Chen looked at Chen Gong and asked, My lord, should we follow? Chen Gong nodded. I'll lead. Just follow behind me. My lord, Chen Gong smiled. Stop the nonsense and follow me. Murong Chen and Murong Jun were both a little moved. They spoke no further and strode after Chen Gong. Naturally, Chen Gong hadn't won over the likes of Murong Chen for no reason. Even if he'd leapt up and become the Emperor of Qi's favorite, he'd still been a poor youth with neither background nor family properties. It wasn't enough to make an arrogant martial art expert like Murong Chen serve him happily. In truth, Shen Qiao had already hit the nail on the head earlier. Chen Gong was tremendously talented. The ability to remember everything he saw and heard had allowed him to seize his stroke of fortune in encountering the Zhiyong strategy. Furthermore, he'd spent great efforts honing himself, and he hadn't been satisfied with becoming the Lord of Qi's favorite official. Judging from his actions, he indeed possessed the potential to become a formidable leader. If they dug a bit deeper, someone like Murong Chen, who had come from a royal family of the earlier Yan dynasty, would have already lost all their authority within this new era if not for their martial arts. They weren't from a powerful aristocratic family, so the emperor wouldn't give them too much authority either. Their only choice was to become hounds and falcons for the true heavyweights. Even the ordinary nobles of Qi could look down on them. Under these circumstances, Chen Gong had given them a new option, and he'd won them over with his own performance. They were naturally willing to pledge their loyalty to a better, more enlightened master in Chen Gong. Isn't this kid like 17? Crazy. Of course, Shen Qiao didn't know the details of the situation, but he'd also spent some time in the secular world himself. Thanks to Yan Wushi's influence, he now had some understanding of the politics and mindsets it was built on. Chen Gong had managed to climb this high in such a short period of time and win over many people. He was indeed someone incredible. If it had been Yan Wushi instead, even if he understood all those mindsets and logic, his arrogant, willful nature meant that he might not be able to bend when necessary like Chen Gong had. I feel like that concept of bending when necessary applies to more than just politically, if you know what I mean. The entire passage had been carved from the mountain. Chen Gong still had some torches with him. Once he lit it, they could see the candlesticks lining both sides of the hall. The entire capital of RuoQiang had sunken and collapsed sometime in the past, which might have caused part of the mountain to cave in as well. Certain points along the tunnel were blocked by boulders that had fallen from above, leaving only a tiny gap through which they could pass. They were forced to carefully squeeze through after the clearing some way of the rocks. RuoQiang was a little worried. There aren't any spiders here, right? Those spiders reek of rotten flesh. But I don't smell that here, so there shouldn't be any around. As they were talking, the path suddenly branched into two separate ones. Everyone halted and looked at Yan Wushi's back. Go left, he told them. RuoQiang was suspicious. Well, wait, how do you know to go left? I went right earlier. There were spiders. Why should we trust you, said RuoQiang. And how are you unscathed after encountering the spiders? Yan Wushi ignored them and continued walking. RuoQiang held RuoQiang's shoulder and whispered, he has the jade cistanche. RuoQiang immediately understood as well. That's right. Since the jade cistanche can counteract the spider's venom, it should also keep the spiders away. But in that case, why would Yan Wushi return to guide them out? He couldn't have suddenly found his conscience, could he? The mighty Huan Yu sect leader suddenly growing a conscience? Well, forget about convincing others. Even RuoQiang refused to believe it. The entire path was angled up gently, which proved that they were heading towards the surface. No one said anything, but they all gradually began to believe Yan Wushi. They followed him until they found another split in the path some distance later. At this time, there were 3 branches. Yan Wushi stopped. This is as far as I came before turning back. Meaning, he also didn't know which path to take from now on. But everyone now understood as well. When they'd entered in the beginning, they hadn't taken the proper roads, so they currently were mainly retreading the capital's inner passages. These splits led to all sorts of different directions. It was just like the hallways within the Central Plains palaces. Some would lead to a different palace, while one would lead to the capital itself, and it was the latter that would lead to the true exit. If they chose any of the others, not only might they end up taking a detour, they might run into spiders or apes and suffer the consequences. Chen Gong asked Yan Wushi, which path would you take? Yan Wushi didn't answer. Shen Qiao had been silent the entire time, but now he suddenly spoke. Since we don't know, we can just leave a mark here, choose a random path. It'll all depend on luck anyhow. If we choose the wrong one, we can only blame our own bad luck. That works, said Chen Gong. He picked up a rock and scored several marks into the stone wall. Shen Qiao couldn't help but do a double take. He'd known Chen Gong's martial ability was fair, but he'd been busy fighting the apes earlier. He couldn't spare the time to observe. Each stroke that Chen Gong made was now obviously infused with true qi. The white marks were scored deep into the walls, showing his level of mastery. Once the marks were made, Chen Gong said, well, why don't we take the middle one? Perhaps that leads outside. Naturally, no one had any objections. Seeing that Yan Wushi wasn't moving, RuoQiang couldn't resist but asking, why aren't you walking? This path, I've never taken it before, so I won't lead. There were slight pauses in his words, and the others hadn't noticed, but Shen Qiao did. RuoQiang sneered. Who knows if you've taken it or not? Now that you refuse to take the lead, how can we trust you? You've not set some kind of ambush for us along the way. In the past, RuoQiang wouldn't have dared to say such things to Yan Wushi, even if he'd had 100 times the number of guts. But this was just how humans were. Now that they'd seen him defeated and downtrodden, their idea of his standing also plummeted. So to the point where they'd think that they could defeat him now too, and that he was unworthy of even a mention. Yan Wushi didn't answer, taking action instead. RuoQiang was standing behind him, or beside him. Yan Wushi moved so quickly that before he could draw his sword, the man had already grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the wall. RuoQiang struck a palm at Yan Wushi, but this was blocked by a light and graceful sword sheath. We're not even out of danger yet, and you're all raring to kill each other? Shen Qiao said flatly. RuoQiang tried to claw at Yan Wushi before he could even raise his hand. Yan Wushi released him and retreated behind Shen Qiao. Everyone stop, yelled Chen Gong. Turning to Murangjun, he said Sect Leader Yan didn't come back and find us. But since he didn't need to come back and find us, but since he did, we should be grateful. You must not be rude to him again. Then he cupped his hands at Yan Wushi. Let me apologize to Sect Leader Yan on San Long's behalf. Since I was the one who chose this path, I'll take the lead. After he spoke, he walked forward while carrying the torch. Despite his show of courage in walking at the forefront, Chen Gong's every step was exceedingly careful. Whenever he felt that something was even slightly amiss, he'd stop and observe the situation for a long while. Perhaps the heavens really did favor him. Their gamble actually paid off. Their entire journey was free of obstacles, even as if they left the tunnel, walked through the capital, and returned to the place they originally had fallen from. Finding the exit from here might have been difficult for a normal person, but all they needed to do was leap upward with their qinggong, secure their positions, and then clamber upward step by step. Okay! The moment the sun and sky greeted them again, everyone was almost blindfolded by the fierce light. But at the same time, anyone who'd spent 3 days underground and almost lost their life down there would find this sunlight precious beyond compare. They were there for 3 days. Crazy. Shen Qiao wound his scarf over his eyes, lest they be blinded by the sudden and intense stimulation. After a moment, once his eyes had slowly adjusted, he removed the cloth and noticed Yan Wushi standing behind him. He'd somehow lost his scarf and could only use his hands to shield his eyes. But he also stuck close to Shen Qiao as if he was afraid he'd run away. It inexplicably looked a little silly. Is he the young version of himself? Oh my god. What are Taoist Master Shen and Sect Leader Yan's plans afterwards? Asked Chen Gong. We'll be passing through Chang'an as we return to Qi, so if the two of you don't mind, I can see you there. That way Sect Leader Yan's identity won't be exposed, and you won't draw any unnecessary trouble. His original goal for this trip had been to open the Taiyi and extract the silk within, but even now, even though he knew the silk was with Yan Wushi, he didn't mention it at all. It was clear he'd memorized the contents. His words to Shen Qiao weren't simply to express his goodwill and magnanimity, but also to tell Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi that he had no intention of revealing Yan Wushi's whereabouts. With a long separation came time for reappraisal. Chen Gong, as he was now, could no longer be judged with the eyes of the past. I'm so crazy astonished by this development. Shen Qiao glanced at Yan Wushi. Thank you for your kindness, but I have somewhere else to go. As for Sect Leader Yan, he should be able to make his own decisions. I'll go with you, said Yan Wushi. Chen Gong smiled, seemingly indifferent. That's fine. Then we'll part ways here. The mountains and rivers forever remain unchanged, and the world is limited in size, so we'll definitely see each other again. I hope that next time we meet, Sect Leader Yan will have made a full recovery, and Taoist Master Shen will be leading Zhandu Mountain once more. Shen Qiao gave no answer to that. He's already expressed himself pretty clearly about that, simply cupping his hands instead. No need to see us off. If they wanted to leave Tuyuhun, they had to follow their original road, back to that small town to rest and purchase horses. Only afterward could they return to the royal capital before traveling on. But Chen Gong and Shen Qiao had different objectives in the first place. Shen Qiao still had many things he wished to ask Yan Wushi, so he had no plans to travel with them. They watched as the others left, leaving behind footprints both deep and shallow in the fine sand. Then a gust of wind blew past, and those prints vanished without a trace. Shen Qiao turned to Yan Wushi. Chen Gong isn't a generous person, he said. You took his silk piece, so even if he remembers the contents, he'll still hold a grudge against you deep down. This will cause you trouble in the future. Yan Wushi stared at him unswervingly, and suddenly said in a hurt voice, It wasn't me, Marengege. I knew it! As soon as he came back and he wasn't saying anything, I was like, it's the kid version. It's Xie Ling. I was like, as soon as he came back, I was like, it has to be the kid version. And yeah, Shen Qiao held his forehead. I know. It was the previous Yan Wushi, but the silk is still on you, isn't it? You can tell us apart? Said Yan Wushi happily. Shen Qiao was silent for a moment. If it were one of your other personalities, you could have never returned after leaving. I'm so happy, said Yan Wushi. You recognized me. I know he abandoned you. I was so worried. I used all of my strength to take control and head back. He tugged on Shen Qiao's hands. Don't be mad, all right? Shen Qiao gave a long sigh. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't be Yan Wushi. The real Yan Wushi would also never say such things to me. I just never thought that a man with his personality could give birth to someone like you. That should be impossible. A trace of an imperceptible cunning surfaced in Yan Wushi's smile. Well, that's not true. Shen Qiao didn't understand. What? Nothing. When can we head back? Should we wait until they're a long way off? I'm hungry. I mean, he's basically saying, he's like, oh no, Yan Wushi started out like Xie Li. Like, this is not, Shen Qiao hasn't gotten it yet. He's not gotten it yet. He's too exhausted. Ah! Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, okay. We have things to talk about, but yes. Chapter 68, Rebirth After Death. They'd fought together beneath the ancient city of RuoQiang, but that was only because they'd shared a common enemy. Now that they were back on the surface, Chen Gong's party of 4 might not be able to take the upper hand against Chen Qiao, but they held a piece of very important information that they could use against him. Yan Wushi had survived the ambush by those 5 martial experts, and Shen Qiao had been the one to rescue him. If this information was revealed, the 5 powers that had ambushed Yan Wushi would definitely not let it go. Right now, Shen Qiao was alone, and it was impossible for him to fight off that many people. Yes, Chen Gong had implied that he wouldn't reveal their whereabouts, but Shen Qiao couldn't trust him so easily now. He naturally chose to be as careful as possible, better safe than sorry, lest he commit the same mistakes. In order to return to Yunhun, they first had to pass through the small town they'd stopped in before, but Shen Qiao didn't want to encounter Chen Gong again, so he didn't rest at an inn within the town. Instead, he found a household to stay in for a few days. This household's conditions were even worse than that of Bana's. They couldn't even offer lamb soup, only fried flatbread, and they didn't have many vacant rooms. They could only spare one. Of course they could only spare one room! Of course they could only spare one room! Why wouldn't they? Previously, you said that the jade sistanch is miraculously effective on external injuries, said Shen Qiao. As you took that much sistanch with you, isn't there hope that we can fully heal your head injury? Yan Wushi groped around in his sleeve for a sistanch and then passed it to Shen Qiao. Here! Shen Qiao was surprised. Why me? You were scratched by the apes back underground in RuoQiang, right? The sistanch's juice is limited, and its curative effects are mediocre. The fruit is much better. Shen Qiao took the sistanch and then suddenly said, well, you're not Aeon. Not Xie Ling, are you? Yan Wushi was quiet for a moment. Oh, you're Aeon, not Xie Ling, aren't you? Yan Wushi was quiet for a moment. Well, how did you know? Shen Qiao shook his head. You talk too much. Xie Ling goes out most of the day without saying anything. And from what I know about Yan Wushi, he would never inconvenience himself in the slightest. Though your personalities all have their differences, some intrinsic qualities never change. When we were at Bana's place, if there was lamb soup to eat, Xie Ling wouldn't touch the flatbread. And if there was only flatbread, then Xie Ling would still endure and refuse to eat while remaining silent. But just now, though your face betrayed your displeasure, you still partook in the flatbread. Shen Qiao, how? You're keeping an awfully close tab on all these personalities. Yan Wushi sputtered a laugh. Ah, Qiao, I had no idea that you paid so much attention to our every move. I'm truly overwhelmed and flattered. If I don't pay close attention, I fear that a fool like myself will get duped again, and I won't even know it. His tone was leisurely and placid as he spoke these words, without even a shred of resentment. How much treachery had he suffered in this world, had been hammered down upon him in order for him to forge such a chivalrous and sentimental heart. Yan Wushi gave a slight sigh. If you're a fool, Ah Qiao, then no intelligent people would exist in this world. Shen Qiao burst out laughing. Well, thank you for your praise. Then Yan Wushi asked sweetly, who do you like more, me or Xie Ling? Shen Qiao froze a little and then knit his brows and said mildly, well, whether it's you, Xie Ling, or some other personality, you're all just a fragment of Yan Wushi's inner demons. Since you've already obtained the silk piece, it'll just be a matter of time before he repairs the flaw in his demonic core. Once that happens, all of you will disappear, while Yan Wushi will still be Yan Wushi. Who I like isn't important. Yan Wushi smiled. You're correct. In the end, we were all born from Yan Wushi and are joined to him. So it's impossible for us to exist separate from this body. So you must like Xie Ling the most, because Xie Ling is the least like Yan Wushi, correct? Shen Qiao didn't answer the question. Instead, he sighed, back in RuoQiang, we never got a good night's rest. Let's sleep first. I'm tired as well. He didn't wait for a reply. He just closed his eyes, crossed his legs as he began to meditate. Oh, Shen Qiao, my dude. Oh, you got it bad, honey. Oh, sweetheart. There are things we're going to talk about this. Oh, there are things we're going to talk about this. In the days he'd spent inside RuoQiang's ancient city, though every step had been fraught with danger, Shen Qiao had also gained new experiences. Those apes weren't as sly and calculating as humans, but they were inexhaustible and far more aggressive. While fighting them, Shen Qiao had often felt like he was wandering between life and death, and every time he escaped a grisly fate, his comprehension of martial arts would rise to the next level. His initial defeat at Bamboo Peak had been wholly unexpected. The moment he'd fallen from the cliff, Shen Qiao's heart had been full of anger and disbelief, just like any other person's would be. But after witnessing all sorts of people and affairs, he'd tempered himself a true tender heart, and he could even face life and death situations calmly. This type of mindset was reflected in his sword play. When he'd used the Azure Waves sword techniques in the past, even if he could endlessly change and wield them with ease, they lacked the confidence born from experience with life and death. But when he used them now, the moves poured out with a transcendental grace. As his young strategy's true chi rebuilt his meridians, it and his personality quietly and subtly actualized each other. Only when a person's mind is truly detached and tranquil could they understand the subtlest, most wondrous aspects of nature's beauty. The endless red dust of the human world sees a lone crane soaring high and far. The heavenly Tao is unfeeling, and I alone have obtained it. An outsider might notice that his aura grew more transcendental day after day. Even dressed in ordinary Taoist robes, he looked more divine than the gods or immortals themselves. To Shen Qiao, this sensation brought him into a deeply profound state, awake yet asleep, in between dream and reality. He could unconsciously sense and know everything around him. The sleeping households, the cold moon that hung at night, outside, the dogs asleep by the fences, the breeze as it rustled in the branches, and even inside his room. Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao suddenly opened his eyes. The man who was supposed to be asleep was staring at him, eyes wide open. Shen Qiao was somewhat uncertain and asked, Xie Ling? Yan Wushi made a sound of confirmation and didn't blink. How come it's you? I wanted to come out, so I did, said Yan Wushi. Though his answer was a little bit cryptic, Shen Qiao actually understood him. He meant that the Xie Ling personality's strong obsessive tendencies had allowed him to take over for now. Words that were brief yet complete, with intermittent pauses, this was indeed Xie Ling's style. I should thank you, said Shen Qiao, for coming back to bring me out of RuoQiang. But you'd already switched with Yan by the time we were out, so I had to wait until now to tell you. No need, said Yan Wushi. So he said, but his eyes remained on Shen Qiao. Lacking the erratic moods, without the icy aloofness hidden within the mocking smiles, Xie Ling's personality had actually become much more distinctive. Shen Qiao felt that if Yan Wushi had been Xie Ling from the start, many things probably wouldn't have happened. But there were no what-ifs in life. Yan Wushi was Yan Wushi. Xie Ling was a part of Yan Wushi, but Yan Wushi would never be Xie Ling. Well, maybe not yet. We'll talk about it! When I was training with the Zhuyang strategy on Zhangdu Mountain in the past, Shen Qiao said, it always felt like I was looking at a beauty through a veil. I knew that she was beautiful, but I couldn't see her clearly, and there was nothing I could do about it. Only after I lost all my martial arts in my battle with Song Zhijing did I realize what it truly meant to fight your way out of certain death and be reborn. By starting over, I was able to use the Zhuyang strategy to its greatest effect, but in this world, giving up everything is easier said than done. Even if they knew that the Zhuyang strategy is capable of reshaping one's meridians, would the likes of Dou Yanshan and Duan Wenyang be willing to give up all the prowess they'd cultivated over the decades and start again? Yan Wushi didn't reply. Shen Qiao didn't need him to either. He smiled and then continued. Even without hearing it from them personally, I know that very few people would be willing to do so. Leaving aside others to talk about myself, even my past self, before I was forced to give up all my martial arts, would have been plagued with misgivings. But if your heart is full of worries, Even if you were just forced to destroy all your martial arts, you wouldn't be able to properly cultivate with the Zhuyang strategy. There's a Buddhist verse that says, one must throw away their life and embrace death before they can give up everything and achieve true peace. But demonic and Taoist cores are fundamentally different. You haven't lost your martial arts either. You only need to repair the flaw, so it should be much easier for you than it was for me. Why are you saying this? Shen Qiao said, you once said that only an evenly matched opponent was qualified to be your equal. Back then, I didn't have those qualifications. Even my current self cannot compare to your past self. With your abilities, repairing the demonic core's flaw is only a matter of time, and you will certainly recover your martial arts one day. What I said just now were the insights I had while cultivating the Zhuyang strategy. I hope they can benefit you. As one who follows the martial path, I also hope for a day when we can have a proper and straightforward battle. I'm Xie Ling, said Yan Wushi. I know, said Shen Qiao. But you're not the only one who can hear those words. Your other personalities can hear them too. Yan Wushi gazed at him silently. Shen Qiao was already used to this. It matched the reaction he'd expected of Xie Ling. He patted the other man's shoulder. It's late. Sleep. After a long moment, that person finally listened and closed his eyes. Shen Qiao also closed his eyes and then returned to resting cross-legged. Ah! Okay. After a few days, Shen Qiao reckoned that Chen Gong's party should have been in a hurry to return to Qi, so they likely wouldn't stay in Tuyunhun for very long. By this point, they might have already reached the royal capital or even left Tuyunhun entirely. So he left the small town and returned to the royal capital of Tuyunhun together with Yan Wushi. It had been a while since they last saw it. Sure enough, they did not meet Chen Gong's party along the way. The Coiling Dragon Assembly had ended quite some time ago, so the Central Plains martial artists had already departed, greatly lowering the risk of Yan Wushi being discovered. But Shen Qiao still felt their characteristics were too distinct and conspicuous. If they continued south, they might end up in more troubles. Hence, he exchanged his Taoist robe for a common Han one and brought back a set of woman's clothes, together with some cosmetics. He placed them before Yan Wushi. Yan Wushi just stared at him silently. Shen Qiao gave a light cough. Your appearance is too striking. It's better to disguise yourself. Yan Wushi didn't answer, but his expression was clearly asking, then why aren't you the one putting on the outfit? Well, you can wear a veil once you change into women's clothes. If the others think you're a woman, they'll avoid looking at you so you're not to arouse suspicions. But if you continue to dress as a man, the moment you meet observant types like Dao Yanshan and Duan Wenyang, they'll be able to pick up some clues. In order to keep from stirring up trouble before you meet up with Han Yu sect, women's clothing is the safest option. The two of them stared awkwardly at each other for a while. Shen Qiao frowned. Will you or will you not wear it? Yan Wushi shook his head. If I don't wear it, what will you do? I'll seal your acupoints to help you into the outfit and then rent a carriage and take you that way. That might be able to be somewhat more painful, but it at least saved me quite a bit of trouble. Yan Wushi lowered his lashes. I'll wear it. Good boy. Said Shen Qiao was pleased, thinking that Xie Ling really was the easiest to persuade. Oh my god! Shen Qiao! Oh, Shen Qiao's in his bad boy era. The white hair peppering his temples had to be dyed black, but his hair could remain in a bun, so no change was required here since many women also wore this hairstyle. His eyebrows had to be trimmed slightly, his cheeks and lips dabbed with rouge. A general look was good enough. They didn't need to be particular about the details. Then he changed into the outfit and embroidered shoes. Though his figure looked somewhat strange and his expression was stiff and cold, an air of handsome beauty remained about his features, which had its own charm. Shen Qiao saw how tense he was and laughed. Don't be afraid. In the past, whenever the portraits of our forefathers at Zhandu Mountain began to fade, I was the one who touched them up. Touching up portraits and touching up makeup, though they're not the same, they still share certain similarities. Okay, the meme for Pride, where it's the person laying down on the bed and the other person standing over them doing their makeup, is there one of Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao out there? Please tell me, y'all. Please, if you are on my Patreon in the Discord, please share this. Oh my god. Once he'd finished, he stood and gave Yan Wushi a once-over and then nodded. Not bad. Would you like to see yourself in the mirror? But the other man had no interest in even gazing or glancing at the bronze mirror. He went and put the veil on straight away. What you couldn't see couldn't hurt you. Oh my God! Ah! Chapter 69! Ooh, TANGREN! By the time the two of them returned to Tu Yunhun's royal capital, winter had already arrived. There were far fewer merchants passing through here to the other countries of the western regions now, and the entire capital seemed completely different from where they'd left off, assuming a cold and lonely appearance. This is only temporary, said a street peddler selling TANGREN. Traveling west in the winter is difficult, so many merchants set off during autumn and return the following spring. Once winter is over, more people will show up again. Okay, so TANGREN is a traditional Chinese folk art with three-dimensional sculptures molded from liquid sugar. Oh, okay. He was a Han, but 10 years ago he'd met a Tu Yunhun maiden while passing by this place with a group of traveling merchants. Afterwards, he'd married and settled down here to have a family. Shen Qiao had natural approachability, the power to make everyone around him extremely comfortable, as if they were basking in the spring breeze. Previously, Yan Wushi had been standing in front of his TANGREN stall for a while, but the peddler hadn't spoken to him. Then Shen Qiao had walked over and asked a couple of questions, and just like that, the peddler started chatting with him like he'd met an old friend from his hometown. There are actually quite a few Han people in the city, the peddler told him. Even the royal and noble families of Tu Yunhun speak the Han language and wear Han clothing, but since we're in the western regions, most people aren't willing to leave their native land and come here. Shen Qiao smiled. That's true. Your wife must have been amazingly beautiful and wise to make you stay. From the way you talk, you have to be a fairly well-read scholar, and yet you're willing to stay in this distant land for her, thousands of miles away from your hometown. Seeing such deep love between spouses truly makes one jealous. Here, Shen Qiao, you are... My gosh. Hearing Shen Qiao's praise, the peddler scratched his head, both embarrassed and proud. Well, thank you for your compliments. I just went through a couple of years' worth of private tutoring when I was young. I'm not much of a scholar at all. And where did you return from? You look all worn from travel. Was it some traveling merchants to spend the winter? Shen Qiao said, we've been on the road for a while traveling west. We saw how the weather was growing colder and didn't dare to keep going, so we returned. We heard that a coiling dragon assembly took place in the capital some days ago. I imagine it's already over. It's been over for a while, said the peddler. Everyone's already left. Though it was busy this year. A lot of people from the Zhanghu came with their swords and sabers. Since I make TANGREN, I didn't get much business from them. In fact, during those days after they arrived, people would draw their swords against each other from time to time. I was so scared I hid home for a couple of days. In that case, the city no longer has any Zhanghu practitioners? None. After the coiling dragon assembly ended, they all left. Did you see those inns? They were jam-packed before. It's much better now. Even after lowering their prices, they can't fill their rooms. However, I heard that Qi was destroyed by Zhou. Maybe the number of traveling merchants heading west next year will drop even further. At first, Shen Qiao had been worried that once news of Yan Wushi's death had spread, Yuan Yang's life would be in danger. But he hadn't anticipated such a huge development would have taken place in the few months since he'd left Chang'an. He couldn't resist throwing a glance at the man beside them. Yan Wushi was wearing a veil, concealing his expression, so Shen Qiao couldn't see it clearly. And she was destroyed? Said Shen Qiao. That quickly? Did they not put up much resistance? The peddler sighed. Who knows? Perhaps the Zhou army was simply too strong. Now thinking about it, my old home was in Qi. It's unfortunate. Even though I've been living far away in Tu Yunhun for years, I've still heard news about how capricious and foolish our ruler was. But I could never imagine such a large nation could really disappear just like that. The unification of the North will still be beneficial to the people, said Shen Qiao. Once things quiet down, the number of merchants traveling to and from the western regions will only increase, not decrease. Another smile spread over the peddler's face. That's true. I'll take your word for it then. I'll be waiting for the day that the Central Plains know true peace. And then I'll take my wife and children back to see my hometown. He kept Shen Qiao in conversation for quite a while and still wished to continue, but then he saw how Yan Wushi was silently standing to the side, seemingly only staring at the TANGREN. Only then did he remember his business, and he quickly laughed. This lady must be your wife, then. Is she also from Tu Yunhun? She's my younger sister, said Shen Qiao. Wife, said Yan Wushi! Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi's eyes met. Shen Qiao guessed that Yan Wushi had done it on purpose due to his dissatisfaction at being made to dress up like a woman, but he couldn't say too much in front of an outsider. He can only give a light cough and throw in a belated explanation. This is my cousin. She's a bit immature, so please don't take offense. It would have been better if he hadn't explained. The moment he did, the peddler instantly imagined a story about a pair of cousins in forbidden love, eloping to a faraway land. They can't escape! He nodded quickly and repeatedly. I understand. Shen Qiao was completely baffled. What do you understand? Even I don't understand. Beside him, Yan Wushi pointed at a TANGREN. I want this. His voice was deep, completely unlike a woman's, but the peddler didn't think too much of it. After all, sandstorms were rampant outside the Great Wall. Some two Yunhun maidens also had hoarse voices because of it. At least he's open-minded. The peddler's spirits rose after hearing Yan Wushi's words. Oh, what would your esteemed self like? I can make anything. Horse, cow, sheep, said Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Well, just one should be enough. What are you going to do with so many? Then I want one, said Yan Wushi. The peddler smiled. Well, all right, of course. Would you like a horse, a sheep, or a cow? Yan Wushi pointed at Shen Qiao. Him. Peddler stared. Huh? Make one of him, said Yan Wushi. Shen Qiao had never been in a romantic relationship before, but the misunderstanding from earlier, combined with the peddler's dubious expression, was enough for him to know where the peddler had gone wrong. He said to the peddler, she's only joking. How about a sheep? No, said Yan Wushi. I want you. Then he said to the peddler, is that all right? The peddler seemed to sense a burning gaze beneath the veil. He quickly said, well, yes, of course. Oh, of course it's all right. Shen Qiao held his forehead. The peddler was indeed quite skilled. His hands moved as he talked, and within 15 minutes, a lively TANGREN was born right before their eyes. Since it had been shaped from molten syrup, the facial features remained indistinct, but its pose and bearing, walking forward with a long cloth bag over its back, really did capture some of Shen Qiao's charm. Shen Qiao laughed, as expected of a professional. This level of craftsmanship must have taken at least 10 years to hone. The peddler let out a small laugh, pleased with the praise. Not at all. Yan Wushi took the TANGREN and brought it before his veil. Then he bit off the head with a snap and started crunching inside his mouth. Shen Qiao could only watch in silence. To avoid attracting too much of the peddler's curiosity and attention, Shen Qiao handed over the money and quickly hauled Yan Wushi away. Oh my god. Zhou vanquishing Qi meant that the north would soon be unified. Neither the Qin dynasty nor the Gokturk Khaganate would want to see Zhou grow larger without opposition. They definitely want to kill Yuan Yang by any means possible. This was because the crown prince, Yuan Yun, showed no signs of being an enlightened ruler even now. If Yuan Yang died, Zhou would become a dragon without its head, a nation without a leader, and it would soon scatter like sand. Following this speculation, Yan Wushi had to appear in Chang'an as quickly as possible. He had to show up as at Yuan Yang's side and demonstrate to everyone that he was still alive. Oh, this could go down very crazily. This could be crazy. Yan Wushi coming out unscathed and healthy after an ambush by 5 of the world's best martial artists would raise his reputation to new heights. Whether it was good or a bad reputation didn't matter. Everyone would hesitate in fear of his might, and no one would dare make an attempt on Yuan Yang's life lightly. However, the problem was that the current Yan Wushi, though not dead, had been gravely injured. The flaw in his demonic core was still there, but the bigger problem was his massive personality shift. Exactly! He'd even split off into multiple personalities, and some of those actually spoke ill of himself. Ordinary people could be deceived, but when it came to the smarter ones, there was a decent chance they'd notice. As for brilliant men like Dou Yanshan and Duan Wenyang, that went without saying. A single glance would be enough for them to realize something was wrong. While Shen Qiao pondered this, Yan Wushi had already finished gnawing at the TANGREN's waist and was moving on to the thighs. Oh my god. Seeing him like this, who would believe that this was Yan Wushi? If he acted like this in front of Duan Wenyang and the others, they'd definitely beat him until even the dregs were gone. Shen Qiao couldn't resist heaving a sigh and pulled him into a tavern. Once they were seated, he asked, "You heard what that man said just now. Any thoughts?" Yan Wushi lifted the veil and shoved the rest of the TANGREN into his mouth, crunching. He expressionlessly looked at Shen Qiao, his cheeks moving as he chewed. Even Shen Qiao, with his incredible self-restraint, couldn't help how his mouth twitched at the sight. Even if you're Xie Ling right now, you should still understand my words, right? Yan Wushi made a sound of assent. Then what are your plans? Should I take you directly back to Chang'an and look for your disciples? No, said Yan Wushi. He seemed very unwilling to talk and was even frowning because of it. After some time, he finally said, "Send them a message." Shen Qiao nodded. "All right. We can wait for Bian Yanmei to receive your message before meeting up with him. Then you can discuss a plan of action together. Wan Yu sect has a fair amount of influence in Qi. Once we enter Qi, we should be able to find one of your members, right? How should we go about sending the message?" "I don't remember," said Yan Wushi. Meaning that Xie Ling did not remember. Once again, Shen Qiao wanted to sigh. Never mind. This matter can wait until later. It won't be too late to discuss it after we return to Northern Zhou. While they were talking, the waiter had already brought over the food. This place was much nicer than the small town they'd stayed at earlier, and there was more than just lamb soup and fried flatbread to order. It was the middle of winter, and yet there was a hint of Manchurian wild rice on their plates, a rare sight. The tavern sat in the middle of the market, and their seats were near the second-floor window. When they looked down, they saw a great many people buying and selling, all calling out their prices. And right below them was a street performer holding a giant weasel hair brush in his arms. As he flipped and leapt, the wet brush tip left right and light and graceful marks all over the ground. A closer look showed that he was mimicking the calligraphy from the Orchid Pavilion by the Western Jin Dynasty's Wang Zhizhi. The performance was both refreshing and unique. Soon it drew in many people who all gathered to watch. Not everyone could read or understand the contents, but the performers' moves were elegant and nimble, and each of them elicited a chorus of cheers. Shen Qiao saw that Yan Wushi was watching attentively, so he too tossed the performer a careless glance. However, when he saw the writing left by the weasel hair brush dragging across the ground, it plucked at something in his heart. Suddenly he made a mental connection, and a flash of insight came to him. The man's performance couldn't be considered martial arts. They were only some rough street moves with punches and kicks. But the man was clever, and he combined them with the dance styles of the western regions. The result was that he seemed to be dancing, but also to be performing tricks, all the while writing characters in between. The bystanders found it refreshing and amusing. Even if the richer ones gave only a few coppers, it was still enough to feed a performer for the day. But the man didn't just put on a perfunctory and half-hearted performance because the crowd was only watching for fun. The Orchid Pavilion characters he wrote out on the uneven ground using the weasel hair brush were quite mediocre. If this had been the Central Plains, countless professional calligraphers would have instantly appeared to sneer at him. However, he wrote every stroke with complete focus, to the point of forgetting himself. He was completely immersed within his own dance, and he stared unswervingly at the ground, paying careful attention to the strength behind each stroke and the structure of each character. The martial path was incredibly profound and abstruse. It selected for talent, diligence, and even more for comprehension. Sometimes days or even years of painstaking training would bring no progress, but there were moments of great advancement too, when understanding would dawn, and the practitioner could instantly enter a new echelon. And right now, as Shen Qiao watched that performer's every movement, a scene automatically sprang to his mind. In this scene, the performer had become Shen Qiao, and within his hand wasn't a brush but a sword. The greatest virtue is like water. Water benefits all things without demanding anything in return. It resides in places disliked by men, and therefore it comes closest to the Tao. The waves of the oceans, the crags of the mountains, the great Tao exists everywhere, melded formlessly into the secular world. Like drifting clouds or flowing waters, he danced through a set of sword techniques. The moves were incredibly close to the azure wave sword techniques, but Shen Qiao knew very well that they were different. They were techniques he'd created himself. Slowly, that set of sword techniques took form in his mind, and Shen Qiao almost forgot everything around him. He even forgot that he was still inside a tavern, forgot that Yan Wushi was still beside him. He immediately leapt to his feet and bounded outside, sweeping towards the city outskirts with such speed he practically flew. He could already wait no longer. He had to actualize this set of sword techniques. Oh, wow! So, interesting! What a weird, what a crazy cliffhanger. What? Oh my God. Holy cow. Well, okay, look. I've been waiting for us to get to at least one particular part in this book, and that has been an explanation of this scene, and we made it. Oh my gosh. So, wow. I mean, Yan Wushi does not look very feminine. in terms of like in this, but you know what? Who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? I may not look it in this video, but I'm pretty flat chested, so I'm like, yeah, I get it. But we get to see the little Tangren Shen Qiao that he devours. We're gonna talk about that metaphor here in a second, but Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao has entered his bad boy era, and I'm like, sir, there are quite a few comparisons. I don't know if I should get Whiteboard-kun out for this. I should probably get Whiteboard-kun out for this. I was sitting here like, I'm not gonna need Whiteboard-kun, and then that was a lie. But yeah, Shen Qiao. I'd like to think that Yan Wushi has, in the weirdest of ways, had this kind of positive impact on Shen Qiao, but at the same time, I also feel like Shen Qiao is kind of mirroring, not novel Yan Wushi, but like Donghua Yan Wushi in some ways, and I'm like, do you know this? Have you realized this? So let's go through this volume here and I'm glad that they settled the whole Ziyang strategy thing right off the bat. I'm glad we got confirmation on that. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's over. It wasn't a spoiler. We're getting through it. There was one thing from the audio drama that was added that I want to talk about when we get to it. Everything else is pretty much spot on. Hearing Xie Ling call Shen Qiao Gege is the most unsettling thing I've ever heard. And hearing him in this like this man baby voice speaking to Xie Lian and to Shen Qiao, not Xie Lian, to Shen Qiao, and he's like that just there's things I want to talk about that I'm like, Shen Qiao's like almost there. I feel like he's almost there. He's in a little bit of denial, a little bit about some things. We're gonna get to it. But yeah, so Chen Gong blows my mind. When we started this series, especially watching the Donghua, if you had told me that Chen Gong would have the type of character growth and development that he's had up until this point, I would not have believed you at all. And the fact that he has this moment with Shen Qiao to like lay bare everything that he's done, because we've guessed and hypothesized like, how did he get to this point and how did he make this, and has he been switched with a different body and is somebody wearing his skin? No! He just evolved and changed and happened to have photographic memory. And it's like, oh, well, that will help. That'll do it. And then he just happened to, like, of his own volition, raise his standards and raise his level. And it's crazy. So basically Yan Wushi, who becomes Yan Wushi again, Yan Wushi offers to trade him a piece of the fruit for the Ziyang strategy volume. He trades him that, which it's so intriguing because before we've kind of swapped in a way. So with the, before Shen Qiao was given the Ziyang strategy guides in order to heal himself. And Yan Wushi kind of oversaw that. He oversaw that happen. There were obvious benefits for him because he could gain from it as well, but there was that. And now that we're on the other end, Yan Wushi is after the Ziyang strategy guide to heal himself. And in this case, Shen Qiao is overseeing this happen because Shen Qiao doesn't stop it from happening, and just like Yan Wushi didn't stop him from getting this Ziyang strategy, he actually kind of like, in a way, orchestrated it to happen. Now, Yan Wushi had way more oversight into Shen Qiao absorbing the Ziyang strategy. He put that into effect, but here it's kind of an interesting little twist of fate between the two of them. But man, and honestly, I think that it's right for Shen Qiao to kind of not trust, but kind of have respect for Yan Wushi in a way, because Yan Wushi wasn't dirty. He gave the antidote to Chen Gong and got the Ziyang strategy in return. He didn't trick him. Now, arguably, did he set up the circumstances where Chen Gong had to rely upon him? Well, yes, but you know what? If Yan Wushi had been anybody else, if Yan Wushi had been Song Jijing or somebody else, he could have just, as soon as he gave him the flower, cut it in half or something and stole the scroll, or he could have killed Chen Gong and taken the scroll for himself because he knows that the scroll is there. But, you know, maybe Yan Wushi knew that he couldn't take the other guys in a fight, especially with these multiple personalities fighting over him. There's lots of things you could say. I'm just saying that the way Yan Wushi went about it, it was calculated, but it wasn't as dirty as it could have been. Could have been worse. Could have been sneakier. But it wasn't. He just took the scroll and he went. Now, he took the scroll and then he left. Which, you know what? The thing of it is that there is one camp that I think Shen Qiao has kind of fallen in, where he's like, at this point, he doesn't expect Shen Qiao to owe him anything. He doesn't expect Yan Wushi to owe him anything or whatever. It's kind of, again, an interesting parallel, because if you look back at the beginning of the novel, Shen Qiao's like, okay, I've healed up, and now I'm going to go on my way. I'm going to go on my way. And he even went as far to tell Yan Wushi in the novel, he was like, well, once I heal up, we're going to part separate ways and we're not going to talk to each other and there's no hard feelings. We're all good. Glad that we got this way and went on our way or whatever. In the Dongwall, Yan Wushi was following him the entire time. But in the novel, we've not seen that. There's been hints of it in the audio drama, but it's not been shown in the novel text. So here before you had Shen Qiao being like, well, once I heal up and get on my feet, I'm going to leave. And Yan Wushi's like, whatever, do what you want. Now you have Yan Wushi that once he gets the scroll, it's like he's going to heal up and go on his way. And he does in the ruins. He just gets the scroll and then leaves to go, recite it and meditate and heal himself. So we think. And Shen Qiao's just like, okay, I'm not holding him back. Why would I? It's the same thing that happened before with Yan Wushi. It's just the roles have flipped. Right? And I wonder, as I'm going to list all of these on here, I wonder as we go if it's going to lead Shen Qiao to slowly but surely see where Yan Wushi was coming from and get his perspective. Does it excuse Yan Wushi for what he did to Shen Qiao? No, that was really bad and was not good, and he should not be forgiven for that. But is this series going to lead Shen Qiao to maybe learning and understanding more about Yan Wushi's character? We're going to see. It's just some interesting parallels. Some interesting comparisons, even though they are different because Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao are very different people. So yeah, so he basically starts to heal himself with using the antidote, and then they find out that they're supposedly trapped. But then I like during the whole time Shen Qiao is just like, I'm just going to rest, take 5. Yan Wushi left, it's fine. And Chen Gong is like, the guy left you, like you brought him along, like aren't you worried? Like, this seems like such an injustice. He's betrayed you time and time again, and he's gotten the antidote and the silk piece, and he's left you, and you just have taken it. Like, aren't you kind of, bummed about that? Don't you feel betrayed? And Shen Qiao is like, look, he's like, you're one to talk. I love that Shen Qiao was like, if we're going to talk about repaying kindness, you really shouldn't say anything because you're part of the reason that all the stuff to the abbot and Chu Yi and Shi Wu happened. So he's like, Shen Qiao's been like, I've been a gentleman and I haven't talked about it. I haven't brought it up, but you kind of earned hot water because of all the stuff you did. So he's like, I don't want to hear about it. And so, he brings that up. He's like, how did you repay me? And what's so crazy is that, Yan Wushi before he brought up to Shen Qiao, he was like, he's like, Chen Gong betrayed you. And Chen Gong did all of this. And he's manipulative. Like, don't you feel bad about it? And Shen Qiao was like, well, you know what? They're not here. I don't have anything to say to them, so I'm not going to speak ill of them. But now that he's there in front of Shen Qiao's like, actually, I have been meaning to talk to you about that. And it's like, there's a part of me that wishes Yan Wushi could see all of these conversations happening, because Yan Wushi seems to feel like Shen Qiao has taken nothing that he's told him and processed none of it. But Shen Qiao's processed all of it, and he's acting on some of it. And it's kind of crazy to see his character like get a little snippy and be a little bit of a bad boy. And I'm like, hell yes. I'm like, yes, Shen Qiao, I'm all about it. And he's like, you and I aren't the same. He's like, I helped you back then. You didn't repay my kindness. He's like, I'm a nice guy, but I'm not going to let you walk all over me. He's like, we're not going to walk the same paths, and we just have to deal with it that way. And I do appreciate Chen Gong standing up for himself, being like, so what if I'm a man whore? It's like, literally, he's like, don't be shaming sex workers, is what he tells Shen Qiao. He's like, don't be shaming sex workers. He's like, yeah, I'm a kept man, but I worked my way up the system. He's basically Reba McEntire in the song Fancy. And I mean, disrespect Chen Gong for it. I still don't like how he handled the whole thing with the donkey pies and the abbot and his subordinates. I don't like that at all. That part still is a little bit stingy, especially with what happens afterwards. But it's like, I do appreciate that Chen Gong is like, I worked my way up. And he's like, yeah, I did sell out. Yeah, I did do some things that most people wouldn't do. But he's like, I did it to gain what I needed to get. So he's like, I don't see how this is a problem. And it's like, okay. And he basically reveals that Murong Chen and Murong Jun and the other guy, the Sa guy, we don't hear much about him. I don't know if he made it back all the way or not. I guess he didn't seem to show up from the caverns with Murong Jun, but I'm assuming that he did. He's like, look, these guys don't follow me just for the glory. He's like, they're not really, and we come to find out that Murong Chen's family were originally from nobility, but they've kind of fallen from nobility. He's like, they follow me because they know the writing on the wall that the Lord of Qi is gonna fall. He's like, and he kind of like gets onto Shen Qiao. He's like, yeah, I used the Lord of Qi. Sorry, I wanted to get ahead. He's like, but I did what I had to do to survive and to move up the ladder. And now that the Lord of Qi is gonna fall, I'm going to have all my ducks in order. Murong Chen and his nephew are going to follow me, and we're going to find a way to make place in this new world wherever it leads. And Shen Qiao is kind of like, congrats. He's just like, congrats. Like when Shen Qiao's like, congratulations, I guess. The way that he talks to Chen Gong, I'm like, Yan Wushi would be proud, because it is very dismissive. It's just very like, fine, you do you sort of vibes. But, you know, he's kind of telling Shen Qiao, he's like, you know what, I don't care what I have to do. I did what I needed. So sorry that, you know, it just worked out the way that it did. He's like, Yan Wushi has betrayed you again and again. In the end, you only await your death together with an enemy like me. Isn't it ridiculous? And Shen Qiao, I like that Shen Qiao defends himself. He doesn't just take it. He doesn't just be like, yeah, Yan Wushi did betray me again. He's like, no. He's like, you know, you were different from everybody else. He's like, I'm not surprised. He's like, I knew you were ruthless. I knew that you could do these things. He's like, you climbed the ladder of success called Mutipo. What a line. He's like, you used him to obtain the Emperor of Qi's favor. He's like, I'm not going to look down on you for that. You get your bag. You know, you do what you got to do. He's like, but you only think of me as noble and virtuous because your conscience is eating at you that you're doing things terribly. And so you have to look down on me to make yourself feel better. And I was like, Shen Qiao was like, because Shen Qiao's like, I try to be noble and virtuous and follow the path that I preach. He's like, but I know deep down that I have bad thoughts, that I have some inner demons. He's like, I'm just choosing to be as selfless as I can. He's like, you only get on to me because you feel bad about making these wrong decisions. And I'm like their conversation was so interesting. And then, you know, they kind of reach this impasse where Chen Gong's like, well, then fine. I'm going to keep going higher up the ladder. I hope that's all right. And Shen Qiao's like, congrats, I guess. And so I love this part here where he says he leaned back against the chilly stone and let himself sink through into the darkness, both in body and in mind. And so we get the idea that Shen Qiao, again, Shen Qiao says here that ever since that betrayal from Yan Wushi, he has dropped all expectations. He's like, I've dropped expectations. I don't expect someone to stand up for me. I don't expect Yan Wushi to like stand by my side. He's like, I don't expect that. What's interesting is, in comparison, Yan Wushi says from the beginning that it's clear that Yan Wushi has been betrayed by someone as well. He's been betrayed by someone, and it has led him to drop expectations. That's why he's like, I treat everybody the same because I don't expect them to treat me any different. And Shen Qiao now is doing the same. Except the difference is that Shen Qiao looks at it from an overall optimistic perspective where he's like, I'm going to treat everybody the same, but I'm not going to expect that I can fix people, and I'm not going to expect that I can woo them or do whatever. I'm just going to be myself and be a good person. And then if somebody betrays me, then I'm just going to like do right to protect myself. Whereas Yan Wushi took it in a negative way, and he says, well, then I'm just going to be myself and do whatever I want. And if people get in my way, they'll just have to deal with it. And I don't care. Like they both have reached a similar place, but they're coming at that indifference in different ways. Like Yan Wushi's in a negative way, Shen Qiao's is in a positive way. And it's so crazy to see it unfold on the page. It's so crazy. So yeah, for many things, just because you gave didn't mean you would give anything in return. Why should he be sad or disappointed? I think that's why Yan Wushi got so freaked out when Shen Qiao was genuinely being kind to him and like kind of like starting to form a relationship. Yan Wushi freaked out because he realized how sincere and genuine Shen Qiao was. And he was like, nope, can't handle this, can't do this. He's like, I don't want to be fixed. And then he kind of freaked out and flew away. Whereas now Shen Qiao, and again, that's kind of the same thing's happening now, where Yan Wushi freaked out because of the flirting that was starting with Shen Qiao. That freaked him out and made him like want to run away. And now Shen Qiao, with the flirting from the other versions of Yan Wushi, is making him kind of freak out and like be like, I just want to throw a bowl of soup over this kid's head. Like it's the parallels. Y'all, the parallels are crazy. So then Yan Wushi shows up next. They talk about the Ziyang strategy first, though, before he shows up. And they reveal that the 5th volume is special. The 4th volume, we find out with the Ziyang strategies that volumes 1 through 4 are all about cultivation and about, like, they can strengthen a Taoist core. A Taoist core amongst others. But volume 5, that mysterious 5th volume, can also heal a demon core. Imagine that. Well, that makes sense of why Yan Wushi was trying to get a hold of the Ziyang strategies to begin with. He was trying to find the one that could fix the demon core. That's what he's been looking for this whole time. He just found a couple others along the way. That makes sense of why he also let Shen Qiao absorb them, because he's like, whatever, they're not helping me. But now he's able to heal his demonic core, potentially. Now, Shen Qiao has an idea of what he thinks will happen when that demonic core heals. I have a slightly different idea of what will happen, but we're going to get to that. But Shen Qiao, I think Shen Qiao kind of sighs because he realizes that once that demonic core gets healed, Yan Wushi is going to leave and kind of abandon him. And then he's going to be like, well, that'll be the end of it, because once Yan Wushi has healed himself, that he won't have anything to do with Shen Qiao. And I'm like, Shen Qiao, my friend, I believe you might be missing the forest for the trees in a little bit of a way. Perhaps. But yeah, so chapter 67 is called Escape from Trouble. And what we have here, the audio drama makes it a little bit clearer. The audio drama establishes that Yan Wushi is, in this moment, he's Xie Ling, but Xie Ling is projecting his voice like he's Yan Wushi. In the audio drama, he's convinced everybody that it's Yan Wushi, but Shen Qiao knows because he's determined the man. Also, I think that it's pretty important to point out, and Yan Wushi points it out as well, or Ayan does, that Shen Qiao has memorized how they're all different, how each of the split personalities are different. Sir, if you didn't care that much, would you be down to knowing like how what they eat determines their personalities? Like, sir. So yeah. So they go down. If I'm going to be perfectly honest with you all, I really thought that the escape out of the ruins would be longer than it was. I thought they were going to take the wrong tunnel. I would have gotten it wrong. I was going to say take the right way instead of the middle way, but nope, they did not. I wonder if that is metaphorical. I wonder if there's some symbolism there in that, there's the way that one direction and then there's another direction and then there's the way to kind of go around the middle. I wonder if that's trying to tie to both Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi, that they can meet in the middle at some point, and that's how they escape together. Is there some symbolism possibly there? Maybe. We'll have to see, but I think that's interesting. I do think that's pretty fascinating. So, in any case, they managed to get through without meeting the spiders again, without meeting the apes again. I thought that was pretty cool. I also liked throughout the entire explanation when Yan Wushi was explaining the idea of the evolution, I also think that's tied to this story as well. It's about evolving as a person. They talk about the apes and how the apes, because they needed to keep their claws sharpened against predators, they used the carnelian to sharpen their claws. But then the carnelian's poisonous, so they would use the cistanche as the antidote. And so over time, they developed a natural immunity. And the spiders evolved to resist the jade cistanche and get away from it because they sensed it was connected to the apes. And so there's this concept about evolving over time. And you have two characters, Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao, who have already gone through various transformations in the story. And Shen Qiao has literally evolved from the ground back up. So it's a really cool theme that we're seeing throughout the story presented in these chapters, which is kind of cool. I like that. So yeah. So Chen Gong, I'm still amazed. I'm still amazed of Chen Gong and how far he's come as a character. It's so crazy. So yeah, and we talk a little bit about Murong Chen and how he's decided to go along with Chen Gong, and Chen Gong climbing in such a short period of time. He's like, the entire passage had been carved from the mountain, and Chen Gong still had some torches. I like the idea too that Shen Qiao points out a very big difference between Chen Gong and Yan Wushi. Chen Gong was willing to do whatever it took to get to the point in the ladder that he's at. So he was willing to sleep with people. He was willing to climb the ladder and kiss up and kiss ass to people. Whereas Shen Qiao is kind of like, I don't think Yan Wushi would have done that. So thus, he couldn't have done it the same way. Also, whenever Shen Qiao questioned whether Chen Gong was going to study the demonic arts, I thought that was a fascinating conversation because, you know, he's been sleeping around, he's been a kept man, so you would think that the duo cultivation, the partnership cultivation would be the way to go, like having sex to get stronger, but Chen Gong is like, no. I like that he says, no, that's not, he's like, I don't want to serve those people. I want to be someone that they rely on. And I was like, sure, Jan, the day that Song Jijing relies on Chen Gong, I will take a shot of something. If that happens, I'll be like, really? So I doubt that will happen, but that's what he wants. Interesting. So yeah, so Murong Jun does not like Yan Wushi at all and doesn't trust them, and they almost get into a tussle. And I like that Shen Qiao is like, let's not kill each other before we get out. He's like, Yan Wushi didn't have to come back and get us. He did. He didn't have to. He clearly did. And at this point, Shen Qiao knows that it's Xie Ling, but he's trying to just get them out of the ruins and get back into the desert. He's like, let's just go. Let's trust the path. And Chen Gong's like, we're going to take the middle route. We're going to go that way. Perhaps that leads outside. And what's crazy is Chen Gong has decent luck and has been shown to be favored in this, which is such a crazy thing. And so it manages to actually work, which is wild. So yeah, the one thing that has been added from the audio drama is that as they're leading, I don't think it's in the novel. I'm going to check real quick. I don't think it's in the novel. It says, it just says that finding the exit might have been difficult for a normal person, but they just had to leap upward with their Qinggong and secure their positions and clamber upward step by step. The moment the sun and sky greeted them again, everyone was almost blinded by the fierce light. But at the same time, anyone who'd spent 3 days underground and almost lost their life down there would find the sunlight precious beyond compare. Before we get to this next part, there is a moment that's been added in the audio drama where as they're all clamoring out, like all the guys are yelling, and Shen Qiao looks towards Xie Ling and he says, close your eyes and follow me. And I'm like, oh, we're setting up. Oh, we're setting up that relationship between them. Oh, we are indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, we are. And so they get out. And I wish that the book, even though I love the illustration, we're almost halfway through the volume at this point. I love the illustration that they included of Yan Wushi just being his arrogant self again. But I wish they would have included one of him like covering his eyes as he comes out as Xie Ling coming out of the cavern, because that would have been adorable. Surely there's fan art out there. I hope there's fan art because it's so, so cute. And so then Chen Gong asks what the plan is. And here's the thing. Before Shen Qiao's like, I've got places to go. Yan Wushi's gonna do his own thing. He's like, I like that Shen Qiao, he's not trying to force Yan Wushi to do anything. He's like, Yan Wushi will do what he wants. And Yan Wushi's like, I'm gonna go with you. And it's like, Xie Ling says that. Yeah. And so Chen Gong doesn't suspect anything's off with Yan Wushi at this point. He's like, you know what? Sure. Hope sect leader Yan makes a full recovery. Maybe we'll see each other again. You know, hope you get back to being the leader of Zhandu Mountain, Shen Qiao. And Shen Qiao's like, well, I'm not. But thanks, Jan. He's like, it's fine. You can leave now. So they go. And then he's like, you know, and I like that Shen Qiao kind of scolds. He scolds Xie Ling. He's like, you know, Yan Wushi took that piece of silk from Chen Gong. He's going to hold a grudge. I know that he holds a grudge because I've seen him hold a grudge. So you shouldn't have done that. And Xie Ling's like, well, it wasn't me, Mian Gege. And he's like, I know. Shen Qiao is just like, fine, whatever. Like, they are talking like a married couple. Even though Yan Wushi is not present for most of it, it's either Ayan or Xie Ling. But they are talking like a married couple. It's kind of crazy. He's like, but you still have the silk on you, don't you? And he's like, well, you can tell us apart. And he's like, yes. He's like, if it was the actual Yan Wushi, he would not have come back. Which I feel bad that Shen Qiao, look, Shen Qiao's not wrong. If it was the actual Yan Wushi, he probably wouldn't come back. But I feel as if Shen Qiao, that's how he views Yan Wushi. From his betrayal, he's like, nope, he would never help me, would never do this. He has no faith in the actual Yan Wushi. He respects him for being consistent, but he has no faith in him. And the sad part is, like in this moment, he's like, well, I'm happy that you recognized me. I was worried. He's like, don't be mad, all right? And Shen Qiao was like, you know, if he didn't do it, it wouldn't be Yan Wushi. Like, Shen Qiao at this point is just like, he is who he is. He's an asshole. What do we do? He's like, the real Yan Wushi would never say such things to me. And then this line, I never thought a man with his personality could give birth to someone like you. That should be impossible. And that trace of imperceptible cunning in his smile, he's like, that's not true. And he's like, what? And he's like, oh, nothing. Let's head back. Because here's the thing. This is what Shen Qiao believes. And it's kind of like funny how it's reversed. Shen Qiao believes that Yan Wushi, because of the Fanglin scripture flaw, because of that flaw, he has scattered into these multiple personalities. That's what he believes. He's like, well, because of the flaw, you've scattered into these personalities. And once the flaw is fixed, he's like, once it's fixed, you're just going to become the old Yan Wushi again. And those other personalities are going to leave. And there's a part of me that's like, but Shen Qiao. The thing is, all these multiple personalities, they are all part of Yan Wushi. They are all part of him. So because of that, I think that because of the Fanglin scriptures and because of events in the past that we don't know about yet, that caused Yan Wushi to be the way that he was. And then the flaw allowed all of these other parts to come back up and resurface. And whereas he had hardened his heart and forced those other parts of his life away, like when he was Xie Ling, he forced that past away. When he was Ayan, he forced that past away. And he's like, I'm just going to be Yan Wushi. But the flaw has drug all those previous parts of his identity back out, literally out of his body into the woodwork. And so, you know, once they're fixed, I kind of disagree with Shen Qiao. I might be wrong. Don't tell me if I'm wrong or right. We'll see. The novel will explain it. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that once the Zhuyang strategy helps to fix his core, I think that these personalities are going to meld with Yan Wushi. And he'll become this amalgamation of everything. Of who he was as Xie Ling, of who he was as Ayan, of who he is as Yan Wushi. It will become a combination of all those things. Will that change his personality? Will he evolve like Shen Qiao has? I don't know. And I think that even though Xie Lian says it should be, or Xie Lian, I keep calling him Xie Lian. I apologize. There's a lot of comparisons I'm thinking of from Heaven Official's Blessing. Even though, and a lot of contrast, to be fair, but mainly contrast. But I feel with Shen Qiao that he kind of is trying to keep himself in denial. He's like, well, that's impossible. He couldn't possibly have been like this at one time. I think he knows. Because at one point at the end of the chapter set, he says, you know, one day I'd like to battle you. And Xie Ling is like, but I'm Xie Ling. And he's like, no, but I know that Yan Wushi can hear. And I'm like, sir, you acknowledge they're all in there and they're all together, but river, the Nile is also a river in Egypt. But oh my gosh. So anyway, so then we're on chapter 68, which is called Rebirth After Death, which is focused mainly on the differences between Shen Qiao and him fighting back and coming back from the dead and how his evolution has been going. And then you have Yan Wushi, who's trying to repair his demonic core. And we'll get into talking about the similarities, kind of like what we've been doing. But I do like that Shen Qiao is thinking about what is the next plan and where do we go from here. And he's trying to avoid Chen Gong. I also like the fact that Shen Qiao is wary that Chen Gong is not to be trusted. And I don't blame him. I think that Chen Gong, I don't know if he will outright tell everybody that Yan Wushi is back unless something happens where they meet up again and Chen Gong asks something of Shen Qiao and Shen Qiao's like, no. And he's like, well, I'm going to tell everybody. And then Shen Qiao's like, do whatever you want. And then it goes from there. But I don't know. That's one thing I kind of am baffled by this part of the story because I didn't see any of this coming. I didn't see any of this with Chen Gong coming and the Carnelian last week. I didn't see any of this with Yan Wushi and the multiple personalities. I feel like I had a pretty good handle on the story up until the end of where the Donghua left off. Because it seemed very much like, well, then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then, you know, Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi are going to mend it together. No, the post-Donghua content has been off the rails, and I have no clue where it's going. And I'm like, it's kind of refreshing to not know what's going to happen next. I'm not going to lie. I actually really, really like it. So, before they get to Tuyunhun, they stop by this village, and of course, there's only one bedroom. What's kind of crazy is that even the romantic tropes like you normally see in a Danmai, this series, whoever said that this was a romance for non-romantic people is 100% on the money. And it's so fascinating to me because you would think, oh, the one bedroom. And instead of them being like in a normal Danmai situation or a normal BL situation where they're like, you know, coyly on the bed, like, oh, I don't know, we're just friends. There's no time for that. And Shen Qiao is dealing with the like infantile personality of Yan Wushi. So there's no time to worry about that sort of thing. He's just sitting cross-legged meditating, you know? And also I think the fact that Shen Qiao is surprised when Ayan gives him the medicine. I'm like, you just as the audience want to grab Shen Qiao and go, Ayan and Xie Ling are both Yan Wushi. They are parts of his personality. They are parts of him as a being. They are just parts that he has repressed to be this individual that he has become as Yan Wushi, but they are still part of him. And I think Xie Lian knows that. I think he knows. Now, Xie Lian, oh my God, I think Shen Qiao knows that. He just does. I think the whole thing is I see Xie Ling. That's what it is. I see Xie Ling and Xie Lian and Shen Qiao. Do you see why that is getting me? But I think that's what it is. I think the Xie Ling is close to Xie Lian, and it's throwing me off this week. But Shen Qiao, I think Shen Qiao knows it, but he's just not wanting to come to terms with it at this point. But that may be something that changes later on. So yeah, and I like that Ayan's like, wow, you've really been paying attention to us. We're so flattered. And Shen Qiao is like, well, if I didn't pay attention, then I'd look a fool later. So I have to, but it's like, come on now. He's like, if you're a fool, Qiao, then no intelligent people would exist in this world. And, you know, Shen Qiao kind of laughs at that. And he kind of, you know, accepts the praise, and it's fun. And, you know, that's when it, you know, at first Shen Qiao is like, oh, well, I'll take the compliment. And then immediately Ayan is like, well, who do you like more, me or Xie Ling? And the audio drama did a really good reading of this, especially from Shen Qiao's perspective. The thing is, it's so crazy to me because on the one hand, Shen Qiao says that, you know, Xie Ling and Ayan, you all are just fragments of Yan Wushi's inner demons. He's like, you've obtained all this. It's just a matter of time before he repairs the core. Once that happens, you all will disappear. Yan Wushi will still be Yan Wushi, who I like isn't important. And I feel like what he's missing there is that when they all disappear and he repairs the core, they could all go back into him and become part of him. And I don't think that Shen Qiao has put the two and two together to realize that. I think he cannot see yet that Yan Wushi, for all the jerk that he is, has these personalities inside of him. He's just separated them out, or they've become separated because of his near-death experience. And, Ayan's like, yeah, we're all born from Yan Wushi and are joined to him, so we can't exist separate. And then he's like, well, you must like Xie Ling the most because he's the least like Yan Wushi. Here's the thing. I don't think that's it. I think that Shen Qiao doesn't want to admit that he likes Yan Wushi because of everything that he's done, and he has every right to admit that. I think he finds himself fascinated by him, and I think he finds himself attracted to Ayan. He just doesn't want to admit it. He doesn't quite know what to do with these feelings. Again, you have Yan Wushi, who did not know what to do with these feelings once he had them, so he just kind of repressed them. And now you have Shen Qiao, who is having these feelings, but doesn't exactly know what to do with them. They're basically both hopeless. These two hopeless boobs that we're following around and seeing what happens with them. That's basically it. But yeah, so after all this, he talks about the Zhuyang strategy and kind of goes through it. And I like that we get these moments where Shen Qiao starts to kind of transcend and become more and more with the Zhuyang strategy and stronger and stronger. And again, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. It is a little bit of a parallel to Yan Wushi, but then he wakes up and there's Xie Ling looking at him. And he's like, well, I wanted to come out, so I did. I think that I wonder if Shen Qiao will get to the point where he starts asking questions about Yan Wushi's backstory and about his childhood and about these other personalities. I wonder if he'll ever get to that point, especially if he thinks that eventually they'll disappear. So you might as well ask now, speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't know if he'll get to that point. It'd be interesting to see if he did. And the thing that gets me is that Shen Qiao, he's like, he felt if Yan Wushi had been Xie Ling from the start, many things wouldn't have happened. But there are no what ifs. Yan Wushi was Yan Wushi. Xie Ling was a part of Yan Wushi, but Yan Wushi would never be Xie Ling. And that's true, but he's still part of him. And it's like, there's so much I want to say, but I want to see what the story does with that. So yeah. So then there's the speech that Shen Qiao gives to Xie Ling and explains to him about how he threw away his life and embraced death so that he could give up and basically start over. And there's not many people who would be able to do that. He is, in fact, one of a kind. Did Yan Wushi know that and put him through that to test him and see if it would work out? Your guess is as good as mine at this point. It's not been confirmed. But then he talks about how, he is essentially doing the same thing that Yan Wushi is doing. Yan Wushi was trying to fix himself and perfect the demonic core so that he could become the most powerful version of himself. And meanwhile, Shen Qiao has been, updating himself frequently through the Zhuyang strategy to create a better version. And what's interesting is that at the end of this conversation, Xie Ling is like, why are you telling me this? You're never going to fight me this. And he's like, well, one day I think that, we're not there yet. We're not at the best versions of ourselves yet. But he's like, I hope that, the Zhuyang strategy can help you like it helped me. And since I follow the martial path as you do, I hope one day we could have a proper and straightforward battle. Like for all this time, Yan Wushi has been asking him and wanting him to be his opponent. And Shen Qiao's been like, I don't know. But here, Shen Qiao says, he's like, I do want to battle you. He's like, I get it. I get what you mean now. Now that I'm getting into this Zhu Yang strategy and seeing its potential and power and how it elevates you, he's like, I get why you'd want to battle someone like this. And I want to get to the point where I can battle you too. And Xie Ling is like, well, but you're not going to battle me. And he's like, well, you're not the only one who can hear these words. So can your other personalities. And I'm like, sir, just, there are moments where Shen Qiao gets it. And there's moments where I'm like, sir, what? But yeah. That's pretty huge for him to say, I want to get to the point where you and I can battle each other. That's pretty significant, honestly. But yeah, so then the next day, okay, can we talk about the clothes? So they're trying to sneak back to get back, because Shen Qiao is like, well, I want to get you back to beyond Yanmei. And, Yan Wushi is in no hurry to get back. Poor beyond Yanmei, he's probably like fighting tooth and nail over all the other demonic cultivators. And he's like, where the hell are they? And meanwhile, they're eating candy at a shop. While Yan Wushi is in drag. So that, again, this series completely defying the Donmai expectations. Because if you told me that this couple was going to have to cross-dress in order to get across the border and be inconspicuous and make it to the other side, I would immediately go to how the other series have done it that I've read and watched, where it's like, okay, Xie Lian would be the one to be dressed as such. Well, you know what? Actually, Xie Lian does not like dressing feminine. He's actually kind of against that. So no, probably not. But HuaQiang would. So actually there might be a little bit of difference there, but HuaQiang would do it willingly. He would volunteer as tribute. But like Wei Wuxian, he would be the one to dress up as the lady. Shin Qingqiu would probably begrudgingly do it. But with Shen Qiao, I love that his immediate thought was, Yan Wushi, you're the more conspicuous of us. You're going to dress up as a woman. And it's just like, I feel like this is subtle payback to Yan Wushi as well, that Shen Qiao has looked at him and gone, now that Xie Ling is the persona that is embodying you right now, I'm going to take advantage of this. He's like, remember all those times that you were cruel to me? Well, now it's payback time. And payback for Shen Qiao is, I'm going to make you wear this dress. I'm going to put makeup on you. And you're going to walk around and be my wife. Although he says sister cousin. But wife. Yan Wushi's all in. And Yan Wushi's all in on it. He's like, He's like, whatever, gay. I was like, ah! So, I love that at first Yan Wushi doesn't want to do it. And Shen Qiao's reasoning does make sense. Shen Qiao is beautiful. But like, you're gonna recognize Yan Wushi. You're gonna recognize the white stripe through the hair, the imposing figure. Honestly, my only thing is that I'm suspect on is like, Yan Wushi's a pretty tall man. So in a dress and with the veil and everything, I feel like they would still be a little conspicuous with how tall she would be. But who am I to say, right? Nobody judges on height in this, so I guess it's all right. Or maybe they're assuming that there's heels involved. Maybe you can't see because of the dress. We'll assume. But yeah, and this part here, I'm sorry. But when Yan Wushi was like, well, what are you going to do if I say no? And Shen Qiao's like, well, I'll seal your acupoints and make you wear it, and then it'll save me quite a bit of trouble if you don't volunteer. I'll just make you do it manually. I'm like, sir, I know Yan Wushi never made you dress in drag to go out and infiltrate anything, but like, you're literally forcing Yan Wushi to do this. And I was like, that attitude is a little wee bit similar to Yan Wushi. And also, as you noted, the other personalities of Yan Wushi can hear what you're saying to him. So when he says good boy, that version of Shen Qiao, I was not prepared for. I was not prepared for Sassy being like, good boy, good job. Like, maybe Yan Wushi's into it. Maybe he's into it, I think he might be. But they dye his hair completely black. They keep it as it is. They trim his eyebrows and they dab some rouge. I need somebody to have done the meme where Shen Qiao is like over Yan Wushi doing his makeup, like the pride makeup. I need that fan art put in the Discord immediately if it exists, because it needs to be shown. It needs to happen. But yeah, Shen Qiao, I also like that Shen Qiao, I like that they don't make Shen Qiao and I'm trying to word this right. They don't feminize him as a man. They're just like, oh, he painted over the portraits. You know, he didn't do the makeup for the women or anything else like that. Like, it just, I don't know. They make it seem very natural for his character, which I appreciated. And then, yeah, and so Yan Wushi does not want to look at himself in the mirror. And he's like, well, you know, what you can't see can't hurt you. And then we have chapter 69, which is TANGREN. Which, TANGREN sounds amazing. The sugar, like, syrup molded into the candies. That sounds fantastic. And so they find this peddler. And, you know, here's the thing. Shen Qiao, again, he's talking it with the peddler about, you know, his wife and his kids. And Shen Qiao is like, you know, your wife must have been amazingly beautiful and wise to make you stay. From the way you talk, you have to be a fairly well-read scholar, yet you were willing to stay in this distant land for her, thousands of miles away from your hometown. Seeing such deep love between spouses truly makes one jealous. Sir? You are thousands of miles away from your hometown, fighting tooth and nail with this man that you've dressed up as a woman and are tugging around, putting your lives in jeopardy. For what reason? I know it's to save Zhou and save the people of China, but still, there are comparisons to the things he tells the peddlers to his own situation, and I'm like, sir, pot calling the kettle black and you don't even realize you're serving tea. Like, just... So yeah, and then he talks about, you know, giving... Before he talks about giving the TANGREN, we find out that she's been destroyed. So, Chen Gong apparently went back and found out that the Lord of Qi might be gone. So the allegiance that Murong Chen and Murong Jun pledged to Chen Gong might come in effect earlier than one would think. So there's that. We'll have to see where that goes. But yeah, so we find out that the Emperor of Zhou has been successful, and Shen Qiao is like, okay, well, that's good for us, because maybe when we'll get back. Although Shen Qiao realizes, he's like, how am I gonna... This whole setup, I'm just gonna say it right now, is a recipe for disaster. Because now Shen Qiao's like, okay, on the one hand, the Lord of Qi has maybe fallen, and the Emperor of Zhou has maybe been successful, and when we go, and Yan Wushi gets back with him, and we reveal Yan Wushi's alive, it will unite the kingdoms, and maybe we can get our goals accomplished. So we are technically a step closer to that. On the other hand... If Xie Ling or Yan is the personality that's dominant and Yan Wushi is not, then it might be a big old hot mess express. And anybody that knows Yan Wushi for more than a second, when they see Yan and Xie Ling, are going to know something's up. So it also creates this kind of like urgency, but then there's this wariness because Shen Qiao doesn't want Xie Ling and Yan to go, but he also needs Yan Wushi to come back to be successful in the overall good. And if he comes back, there's a chance that the other two might disappear, according to Shen Qiao's theories. So it's creating a stage for some chaos, is what it's doing. So yeah. So then I love in the audio drama, it's great. In the audio drama, the man's like, well, this lady must be your wife, right? And at the same time in the audio drama, Shen Qiao goes, she's my younger sister, my wife. Like at the same time. And then Shen Qiao's like, ah! And I like that the peddler assumes that they're like secret like cousin lovers. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like incestuous. And the way that Yan Wushi says, I want him. I'm like, Shen Qiao, you know that these are parts of Yan Wushi. You know they're parts of his personality. They want you so bad that you're like, it's not computing that Yan Wushi might, despite all of his own denial, have a flicker of interest in you as well. I mean, I get why you would think that he doesn't because he betrayed him so badly. I get why he thinks that he doesn't. It's just so funny because we, the audience, we're like, he does! And Shen Qiao just has reasons for not wanting to believe that, you know? But yeah, I also love that the moment he gives him the TANGREN, that Xie Ling immediately like bites the head off and just chomps down on the candy so quickly. And poor Shen Qiao is like, he's like the meme of the kid that's like side-eyeing the camera, like just crazy. So Shen Qiao ponders on the problematic elements of going back and what they're going to be doing. And as he's pondering on these life and death scenarios, Yan Wushi is gnawing at his TANGREN waist and moving on to the thighs. And it's like, The way that they described him eating the tangren too, I don't know if anybody else got the vibes from this, but just the description and the language used, it felt very sexual. I don't know if that's a good word for it. It felt very sexual, and I was like, okay, but it's crazy. So he's like, even if you're Xie Ling right now, you should understand my words. What are your plans? Should I take you back to look for your disciples? And Yan Wushi's like, nope. He's like, send him a message. And I love when Shen Qiao is like, okay, that's a great thing. You know, Beyond Yanmei may freak out when he sees that his master has an infantile version of himself. So how do we send the message? And Yan Wushi's like, I don't remember. It's so good. And Shen Qiao's like, okay, never mind. Well, we'll come back to this later. We'll come back when maybe Yan's taken over. We can maybe do that. That might work. So funny. But then the end of this chapter is literally Shen Qiao looks out the window and he watches this performer. And as this performer is doing these calligraphy moves, they remind him of sword striking, and he gets inspired. And it's like an artist or a novelist wakes up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. and is like, I've got to write this idea down, or I'm going to forget it. I've got to write this down. I've got to act on this, or I'm going to forget about it right now. Like, it was one of those aha moments. And Shen Qiao's like, I need to go act on it right now. And the crazy thing is, he leaves behind Yan Wushi to go act on it. So, what I've been wanting to say is that at the end of this chapter set, Shen Qiao gets inspired. And it's inspiration that is for his own self-gain. But it causes him to leave Yan Wushi behind. For the moment, we think. I don't know what we're going to get next chapter set, but he leaves him behind. The thing that's crazy is that in the earlier parts of the novel, Yan Wushi was very much also about his own self-gain and, you know, finding ways to improve himself. And in the process, he was not afraid to leave Shen Qiao behind. I'm just saying, there are parallels in this chapter set of Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi that are very interesting, very intriguing, and I am amazed that Shen Qiao left behind Yan Wushi, but he said it was fine. We shouldn't be surprised, but I want to know what is going to happen next week. So I'm going to wait near your comments for the last episode sets on Patreon and YouTube. I'm going to wait till those come out before we talk any further, but I am so excited to get back in to the next chapter set. We are about halfway through volume 3, and it's just been chaos in the best way. So I felt like I was rambling a little bit with my thoughts in this week, but I'm overwhelmed by all of this between Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts below. Maybe you can clarify some things I'm not quite getting out the way that I want to, but maybe my tongue will not be tied as hard next week. So regardless of that, I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. I am loving volume 3 so much. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Thousand Autumns. Bye.